All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 8. You can believe that. We will officially be just past the halfway point after this week. So we're on our way. Yeah, I mean, this is not quite the home stretch, but we're getting there. So, of course, you have spring break next week. So I hope you all take a chance to sort of unplug and unwind and just, you know, like take a break, take a real break and refresh yourself for the last push, the last 7 weeks. So this week is one of our, I guess, most important overarching topics, because it impacts every single issue. Literally every issue that we talk about this semester is impacted by this one, and this one being, of course, climate change. Um, so this is obviously a really big topic, and will, by necessity, only be sort of hitting the surface. But I want to introduce to you as much of the sort of essential information as possible, and then provide some insight and maybe some inspiration to do some further investigation on your own. Um, One way or another, you're going to be dealing with climate change if you're not already, and we all are in some way, shape, or form in terms of food prices, and immigration is impacted by climate change. A lot of people don't talk about that, but regardless, this is really a really big systems thinking issue, because it's all of our systems are impacted by this in some way, and vice versa. Before I begin with the overview, I want you to remember that by the end of this week, you have to provide your group membership. I don't need a topic. I don't need any of that. I just need you to pick your group. Okay. So 2 to 3 people per group. Um, and the discussion board is still open, and you can either send me an email after you decide, or you can just post to this at the end of the week. Um, so again, there's this doing this weird thing in some of these pages where you have this giant description. So there's this little drop down arrow. Click that, and then I get rid of it. All right, so climate change and energy is the topic this week. A couple cartoons as usual. Um, the review of last week, which I posted as well. So this week, um, energy and climate change. So I briefly go over the importance of energy to society, in terms of, this chart in particular shows the price of oil over time, and you can see this giant area from 19 late 1800s through the 70s, when we had the oil shocks, which we could talk about if you'd like. But there was this huge period where oil was cheap, and that, not coincidentally, coincided with a lot of the sort of modernization that we went through as a country. There are, of course, other energy sources in there. We were already digging for coal, um, and then we started natural gas in the 20th century, and then sort of the mid to late 20th century started to use nuclear. Um, we were using renewables, I mean, for thousands of years technically, but we had the first hydropan was the late 1800s in Wisconsin, and so we've been using renewable energy for a while as well. It really took off in the 70s, and then really, really took off in the 2000s. So just to give you a sense of sort of the dominance of fossil-based energy, I show you a chart here. So I really want you, when you're done with this lesson, to at least have a working knowledge of the difference between fossil fuels, renewable energy, and non-renewable energy, as well as carbon-free and carbon-neutral fuels. Um, and I do put this little caveat in here that, of course, as a sustainability advocate and in a sustainability class, we have to be concerned about our excessive fossil fuel use with regards in particular to climate change. But it is important to point out that there's no denying that fossil fuels have played an absolutely essential role in our development as a society. They've brought a lot of good things, or helped to bring forth a lot of good things to billions of people. So I don't want to be dismissive of that. But we've kind of reached a point where the chickens are coming home to roost, as it were, and we really need to consider moving away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible, um, sort of as with the least amount of societal damage, uh, but certainly. environmental damage as well. So we talk about climate change, and the short story is it's about energy. Energy is the something like 70 to 80% of all CO2 emissions are from energy. Basically, when you burn something that's carbon based, like coal, oil, or natural gas, it emits CO2. That's the short story. I could happy to, you know, expand on any of that, but it's all about energy. Um, and as you can see here, this is the emissions from different energy sources over time. So this is the dynamic chart. You can click on it and play around with it if you'd like. And so climate change is no longer, it's no longer a question what's causing the observed change in the climate that we've seen. Excuse me, the observed warming that we've seen over the last 100 years or so. It has now been settled that it is mostly from, almost entirely from humans. Okay, so we are the ones that are causing the climate to get warmer. And we know that the climate is getting warmer. So there's no denying that, and there's no denying anymore that humans are the major role. Okay, so it used to be a little bit up for debate, but it's just not anymore. Um, so really what we need to figure out is how do we prevent the worst from happening? And that's the argument we should be having. Unfortunately, in the United States, and we are the outlier among industrialized countries, in most other countries, they're not really arguing about whether or not it's real. They're arguing about how do we actually address it? Do we use the market? Do we use the government? Do we use subsidies? Do we, whatever, use free market environmentalism? There's all kinds of potential options. But we're wasting our time arguing about whether or not the science is real. There's no denying it anymore. And there's no denying that it's an overall bad thing. So that's a United States thing, just so you're clear. I think a lot of people don't know that they probably assume that people all over the world are arguing about whether or not climate change is real, but it's not. It's in the United States. I'll go over some of the major international bodies, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. That's a word I do want you to, at least if you see it, you know what it means. So that is the most august important climate change research and publication body in the world. It's convened by the United Nations. Every single country in the world is part of it, and every single country of the world has to approve the reports that they put out. They put them out every 5 to 6 years or so. The last one was in 2023. So I provide links to everything here if you are interested. But the IPCC is a major body. Okay, and so um, some of the key things I want you to walk away with: difference between renewable, non-renewable energy, fossil fuels, and nuclear. I want you to understand how the greenhouse effect works. It's actually not very complicated in case you've never gone over this before. It's really pretty simple. Um, and also, we know that the greenhouse effect, of course, is real. And it actually makes life on Earth possible. So the greenhouse effect itself is not bad. It's this enhanced sort of runaway greenhouse that's being caused by the extra greenhouse gas emissions. That's the problem. Okay, so I do want you to understand this. I mean, a lot of people have never really dug into this before, so I hope that you do understand it. And then we'll look at some of the connections between energy use and climate change. The precautionary principle is a really important term this week. It's something that we should apply every week and all the time with regards to sustainability. And it's actually pretty straightforward, and I would say common sense. The precautionary principle dictates that you got to find the worst possible outcome of a choice you're making, right? So if you're making a decision, whatever major minor decision, maybe it's a major policy decision, like should we ban a chemical or not? Should we uh, pass a law reducing emissions or not, and so on. And so the precautionary principle, if you use that, you think, okay, what is the worst possible outcome of this decision? So, with climate change, if we don't do anything about addressing emissions and they keep going up, that's our worst possible scenario because that's going to be where the worst impacts of climate change occur. The precautionary principle would say that let's at least prevent that outcome, if nothing else. Okay, so what do we need to do to prevent that really bad outcome? Um, and that's one way you apply the precautionary principle. This is something that we don't do much in the United States in terms of the policy world. In Europe, they're much more precautionary principle based, Canada as well. And so, in terms of climate change and chemicals and some social issues, they're more precautionary based, and they basically say like, what's the worst case scenario, and we'll do everything we can to avoid that. Okay, so that's a term that I want you to know what it means and how to use it. And then we'll talk about carbon neutrality when we need to be carbon neutral by. And then finally, you learn a little bit about some of the emissions and the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere right now, where we're headed, some of the recent measurements, and are we setting records? Are we not setting records? Should we care? And then finally, a little bit about the Paris Agreement and what that is. Really brief overview, and at least know the basic Paris Agreement goals. Okay, and there's a couple other things in here. Um, this is something that was a publicly available website that I actually wrote, and so I had to sort of convert it to D2L format. So some of it is anything that's clickable is optional, right? So there's a couple. I tried to minimize it so that it's optional, but there's some really good information here if you're interested. I do suggest if you have the time, sort of going through some of this stuff because it actually is really informative. Um, it's just like it gets pretty heavy if I have everything there. Okay. And then there's also an extra, here's another reading here. This is from David McKay. And just I want to note that you're only to read page 5 to 16. You can absolutely read the whole thing, but it gets a little heavy, and just sort of unnecessary. So at least read that. Okay, then of course you have your normal weekly questions. There's a few more questions this week than normal because there is a little more content than normal. And then of course the group project membership. Okay, so again, huge topic, hugely important topic. There's so much more that I could put in here. I would be happy to discuss any and all of this, expand on any of it. Maybe we'll have some good discussions in the coffee shop this week, the virtual coffee shop. But we'll certainly discuss some of this when we meet next time. And remember, our next meeting is on March 28th. So, okay, well, hopefully you enjoy the content. I hope you all have a great week. If I don't see you, or if I do see you, I hope you have a wonderful spring break. And I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks.